2025 had barely begun when tragedy struck the skies over Washington, D.C. A routine flight turned into an unimaginable catastrophe, one that shattered families, stole young dreams, and left an entire nation in mourning. Among the victims, a team of promising gymnasts returning from a competition, soldiers homebound after months of service, children whose laughter once filled the aisles of that doomed aircraft. In a matter of seconds, all of it gone. The Potomac River Mid-Air Collision has devastated America and the world alike. And as investigators piece together the final moments before impact, chilling new details have begun to emerge. What went wrong? Could it have been prevented? And how did 2025 begin with such heartbreak? Let's find out the details about the 2025 Potomac River Mid-Air Collision. But before we do that, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you never miss an update on the skies that shape our world. They say the Potomac River has witnessed the entire story of America, from the birth of a nation to its greatest triumphs and darkest hours. But on January 29, 2025, these waters became the final resting place for 67 souls who never made it home. American Airlines Flight 5342, a Bombardier CRJ-700 operating as American Eagle, was on its final approach to Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport after a routine flight from Wichita, Kansas. Captain Jonathan Campos, a 34-year-old pilot with 6 years at the airline, guided the Bombardier CRJ-700 toward runway 33. In the co-pilot's seat, 28-year-old First Officer Samuel Lilly handled communications with the tower. Neither man knew they were flying into tragedy. At the same time and 3 miles away, Army Captain Rebecca Lobach was at the controls of a Black Hawk helicopter, call sign PAT-25. At 28 years old, she was undergoing her annual night flying evaluation with Chief Warrant Officer Andrew Eves as her evaluator and Staff Sergeant Ryan O'Hara as crew chief. Their mission that night was routine, practice flying with night vision goggles along corridors established for government evacuation in emergencies. They had no VIPs on board, just 3 soldiers doing their duty. 8:43 p.m. The regional jet makes contact with Reagan Tower. The controller, working alone despite normally having 2 people during this busy time, clears them to land on runway 33. It was a visual approach. The helicopter was about 1.1 nautical miles west of the Key Bridge, following helicopter route 1 to helicopter route 4. 8:46 p.m. Just 2 minutes before disaster strikes, the controller calls the helicopter crew. He informs the helicopter crew of a CRJ-700 circling to runway 33 at 1,200 feet, south of the Woodrow Wilson Memorial Bridge. The helicopter crew acknowledges sight of the jet and requests visual separation, which is approved. But something has already gone wrong. The flight recorder would later reveal that the word "circling" never registered on the helicopter's cockpit voice recorder. The crew believes they see the airliner, but do they have the right aircraft in sight? Meanwhile, aboard Flight 5342, world champion figure skating coaches Vadim Naumov and Evgenia Shishkova are ready to meet their son, Maxim. 13 sets of parents, who have traveled to support their young skaters, settle in for the flight home. For many, this direct route from Wichita to Washington is a victory in itself, the culmination of years of lobbying for better air service to connect Kansas to the capital. 8:47 p.m., 20 seconds before impact. The radar system triggers a conflict alert in the control tower. Controller, Pete 25. Do you still have the CRJ in sight? The helicopter crew confirms. The controller tries to avert disaster. Controller, Pat 25. Pass behind the CRJ-700. But in a cruel twist of fate, the helicopter crew keys their microphone at exactly that moment, potentially missing the critical instruction to pass behind the airliner. The result? deadly confusion. The instructor pilot believes they're being asked to move east, away from the river's west bank. The helicopter maintains course at 278 feet, 78 feet higher than regulations permit for that corridor. 19 seconds before the collision, the airliner crew received an automatic alert from the Traffic Collision Avoidance System, TCAS, stating, "Traffic, traffic." 7 seconds before the collision, the airliner finished its turn to line up with runway 33. 1 second before the crash, the airliner increased its pitch with its elevators deflected close to its maximum nose-up travel. 8:47:59 p.m. A moment that would shatter countless lives. The helicopter explodes on impact. The regional jet, carrying dreams of Olympic glory and families eager to return home, spirals into the freezing Potomac. 67 souls, gone in an instant. The collision may have damaged the rotor blades of the Black Hawk and the left wing of the CRJ-700 as the airliner fell in a left-hand spiral into the water. Witnesses reported that the airliner split in half upon impact, while the helicopter crashed upside down near the airliner. For John Donnelly, Chief of DC Fire and Emergency Medical Services, the call came at 8:48 p.m. His teams arrived within 10 minutes, but they already knew what they're facing wasn't rescue. It was recovery. Water temperatures of 35 degrees. No signs of survivors. After the collision, Reagan National Airport suspended all takeoffs and landings, diverting flights to nearby airports, including Dulles, Baltimore, Washington, and Richmond. The airport remained closed for over 14 hours until 11 a.m. on January 30th. American Airlines launched a hotline for family members of passengers on Flight 5342. By February 4th, all bodies had been recovered, including the 3 soldiers in the helicopter, and all of them were identified by February 5th. The fuselage of Flight 5342 was found upside down in 3 sections in the river. The search for debris was extended to the Woodrow Wilson Bridge, 3 miles, 5 kilometers, south of the airport. According to federal officials, the wreckage of the helicopter was also recovered and was transported to a secure location. For the figure skating community, the echoes of another tragedy resurfaced. In 1961, Sabina Flight 548 crashed in Belgium, killing the entire U.S. figure skating team. Now, 64 years later, history has cruelly rhymed. 11 young skaters, full of dreams, alongside their dedicated coaches and proud parents, were returning from a national development camp tied to the 2025 U.S. Figure Skating Championships in Wichita. Some had already imagined themselves on Olympic ice one day, perhaps in 2030. Gliding under bright lights, their names announced to roaring crowds. Among the coaches were former Soviet and Russian figure skaters, including Inna Volyanskaya, who had once flown across the ice in perfect unison with her pair's partner, and Alexander Kirsanov, a former ice dancer. They had spent their lives shaping the next generation of champions, but none of them made it home. Among the victims were 1994 world champions Evgenia Shishkova and Vadim Naumov. Their son, Maxim Naumov, was not on the flight. In Wichita, where Flight 5342 began its final journey, the community gathered in grief. This Kansas city had fought for years to improve its air connections, to put itself on the map for national sporting events. Now it mourns the bitter price of that connectivity. At the Legacy on Ice Memorial on March 2nd, Maxim Naumov takes center ice. As he performs to his parents' favorite song and collapses in tears at the finale, the arena weeps with him, a young man orphaned by the sky. But how could something like this happen? Well, the answer is the overly complicated airspace of Ronald Reagan National Airport. It's characterized by restricted zones designed to protect the nation's capital. Despite ongoing efforts to alleviate congestion, the addition of more flights in 2024 further complicated the aerial landscape. Military helicopter operations, including designated corridors that intersect closely with commercial flight paths, added layers of complexity to an already intricate environment. On that fateful night, air traffic control staffing was reportedly not normal for the time of day and volume of traffic. A single controller was responsible for managing both helicopter operations and the sequencing of landing and departing planes, a role typically assigned to two controllers during such periods. This consolidation of duties occurred earlier than usual to accommodate a controller's early departure. While the union representing air traffic controllers cautioned against hastily attributing the crash to staffing decisions, the deviation from standard protocol raised significant concerns. The helicopter route had passed within just 15 feet vertically of the commercial approach path. Now, in the aftermath, the FAA restricts these routes to only essential flights, a change that comes too late for 67 families. Chesley Sully Sullenberger, an aviation safety expert and the pilot of U.S. Airways Flight 1549 that ditched in the Hudson River in 2009, expressed his grief and argued for more safety zones and restrictions on flight patterns. As pieces of the aircraft were lifted from the Potomac, investigators began the painstaking work of understanding why. Why was the helicopter flying higher than permitted? Why wasn't its location broadcasting system active? Why did crucial communications fail at the most critical moment? Multiple agencies, including the NTSB, FAA, U.S. Army, and Department of Defense, launched investigations into the collision. The FBI also assisted but found no signs of terrorism. Canada's Transportation Safety Board joined due to the Bombardier CRJ-700's Canadian origin. Flight recorders from both aircraft were recovered, the jets on January 30th and the helicopters on January 31st. The NTSB determined the helicopter was flying at 278 feet at impact, exceeding Reagan National's 200-foot altitude limit. However, its barometric altimeter readings were unavailable for analysis. Senators Ted Cruz and Tammy Duckworth questioned why the helicopter's ADS-B system, which transmits critical flight data, was off. Investigators are determining whether it was turned off or malfunctioned. The crash also raised concerns about air traffic control, as a single controller was managing both aircraft, an unusual setup for that time of day. Cockpit recordings revealed the helicopter crew missed key transmissions about the PSA jet's movements. 17 seconds before impact, their radio transmission overlapped the controller's warning to pass behind the jet. The PSA crew received a TCAS alert 19 seconds before impact, and data suggests the jet pitched up 1 second before the crash, though it is unclear if this was an evasive maneuver. And as time progressed, the tragedy turned political. Within hours of the crash, President Trump takes to social media questioning the competence of those involved. Later comments about diversity initiatives at the FAA spark outrage and defenses, turning tragedy into talking points. But for the families, politics offers no comfort. American Airlines retired flight number 5342. The new Wichita to Washington route became Flight 5677. A small change that acknowledged an irreplaceable loss. Tonight, as the sun sets over the Potomac, the river would remain indifferent to the dreams buried deep beneath its surface. Above, planes would continue their journeys, perhaps unaware of what happened here. But for 67 families, time stopped at 8:47:59 on January 29, 2025. They were more than passengers and crew, more than statistics. There were birthday parties yet to be celebrated, graduation ceremonies never attended, weddings that will now have empty seats, Olympic dreams frozen in mid-flight. 67 stories, suddenly punctuated with a period when they deserved entire chapters. Which story devastated you the most? Let us know in the comments below.